Your grandmother was a refugee. She was only 8 years old when she escaped from the aftermath of the failed 1956 Hungarian Revolution. For a month, outside of her home in Budapest, the streets were thick with smoke, gunfire, and debris. People shouted, people ran, and people fought. And amidst all this chaos, her own mother passed away from cancer. She was only 30 years old. A convergence of your grandmother's unrelated personal loss with the devastation of a failed political uprising punctuated the fall of 1956. From her bedroom window, your grandma witnessed Hungarians fighting Soviets, Soviets fighting Hungarians, even Hungarians against Hungarians. And as the revolution collapsed, the Soviets regained control. One by one, they picked off the revolution's leaders. Neighbors informed on one another. People were hanged in the streets. Time was running out. Immediately after the revolution, and right before your great-grandmother's funeral, your grandma Valerie fled Hungary with the rest of her family. Her dad, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, István Martinhegi, held her hand in the hand of her brother, my Uncle Pete. He gathered them up as fast as he could. They left everything behind. Because he had taken up arms against the Soviet Red Army. And they were in danger. Your grandmother was a refugee. Like thousands of others, her family escaped the scorched city, sheltering with an underground network of revolutionaries. Cautiously, they headed south through old World War II minefields, thick forests, and snowy pastures. They hid from Red Army patrols and desperate countrymen who might turn them in. Their destination, Otishevo on Lake Prespa, located in what was then known as the Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. In an ordinary world, it would have been a fun, even luxurious family vacation. Instead, they arrived cold and exhausted as the UN and the Red Cross improvised to provide food, beds, and clothing for thousands. The original attractions of the resort beckoned from advertising photos like a cruel reminder of a world where happy, playful families never hear tank tracks and mortar shells. They stayed through the spring of 1957 when Hungarian-American relatives sponsored their passage to the United States. Going through customs in New York City, they had barely landed on American soil before hopping a train to Steubenville, Ohio. After surviving together this far, they were suddenly separated. Your grandma's dad suffered from tuberculosis, and he was sent to a sanatorium. Grandma Valerie and great-uncle Pete were then sent to a Catholic orphanage until your great-grandfather István was well enough to take care of them. After fighting for freedom in Hungary against the Soviet Union, as fate would have it, they were estranged in the United States and lived in forced isolation. During this long year apart, everyone learned to speak English and slowly but surely to adapt to a new way of life. Your grandmother was a refugee. She started over in America in an orphanage. The nuns were tough and strict, but at least there were 3 meals a day and no gunfire or tanks or bombed out buildings. Another year went by. Great-grandfather's condition had improved enough so that he could take care of his children. Reunited, the family moved to Columbus, Ohio in 1959. Your grandmother grew up to become an American teenager. She graduated from Catholic high school in 1966. She always took care of her little brother Pete. And over time, maybe she forgot, and maybe even recovered, from the death of her own mother and for being a child witness to violence and destruction. And yet, her adolescence was filled with the struggle to reconcile these experiences with her suburban Midwest surroundings. Because like so many young Americans in the 1960s, your grandmother Valerie sought to break away from the past and redefine the future. In her case, she ran from the war of her Hungarian past and the war of her American present. While the boys she knew from Ohio went off to fight in the jungles of Vietnam, she embraced another new beginning, reinventing her American self by going west to pursue a different kind of American dream in Southern California. Here she met your Grandpa Ken. They were 20 years old, and that is a whole other story. Your great-grandfather István died in 1978, and he was only 58 years old. I was just a baby. Your grandmother was a refugee. Her story is a part of our story, pieced together here not just for me or just for you, but for your kids and their kids too. This is the story of how you, my son, the great-grandson of a revolutionary and the grandson of a refugee, came to be an American boy.